Good morning, Bombardiers, and welcome to our final episode of Saturday Morning Serial for February. We're already looking forward to all of the cool things that are coming up in March, and so this is wrapping up the month. This is the 29th of February, so, we've got an extra day here, but that didn't help me any this month. This episode is going to be, just like any good Saturday morning serial, a two-part cliffhanger. Unfortunately, the stuff that I was going to get done this week got a little bit derailed. I've been working on some client stuff. I can't actually show it to you yet, which is a little bit disappointing. But I will be posting that stuff over on my Sculpt Dude Facebook page just as soon as the clients that I'm working for are ready to post that. I can tell you that one of the pieces that I was working on was for Victoria Miniatures again, and she's getting ready for Adepticon and has left this week from Australia down under to head to the US in order to bring all of her goodies to Adepticon at the end of March. So there was a limited edition piece that she wanted to provide, for the attendees at Adepticon. And so she asked me to sculpt this piece for her, and of course, I love doing stuff like that. And so hopefully here in the next week or two, when she releases the pictures of that, I'll be able to show those to you, and I'll post those over on the web and probably on one of the episodes of Saturday Morning Serial. So anyway, as we were talking about last week, you may remember, we had gotten the prints in from Vision Proto for the Monster Babes that we're going to release in resin. So I was able to get those in, and I'm going to take you through the process of actually cleaning those and putting them on mold. Now, that's what I was talking about. I didn't quite get all of that finished, so I'm going to go through the first part of this and show you the molding process and the masters, and then I will show you casting and making production molds and so forth on a future episode. So hopefully, depending on how the schedule goes, that'll be within the next week or two. Now, because I already had the sculpts finished for February, February set of the Patreon theme. The sculpts that I had for that, which is Terry's Crew, which is the Arcane Gun Mage and the Arcane Construct and Iron Golem and all those that we've shown you before, I went ahead and sent those out to be printed also. So those will be going through the molding and casting process here just as soon as I get those back. So we're pretty excited about that. But let's get back to the Monster Babes, and let me kind of show you what I was working on this week. The first thing that I did was, once that I got the prints in, was I had to go through and clean off the supports. So I use a variety of tools to do that. It just depends on where the support is and how large it is and that sort of thing. But there's all these little bumps on the back of the prints, depending on how they were oriented in the printing. And so here I've got to use an X-Acto knife to scrape those off or slice through them. The particular type of resin that we get back from Vision Proto is kind of this, like a waxy sort of resin. So cleaning it's a little bit tedious, and I did break off a finger on one of the characters, and I had to glue that back on. You won't be able to tell which one it is whenever you get the castings. So once I get all of the prints cleaned up, then I go through and here I glue the tabs on the bottom of the feet for the characters that need them. I was printing those out before, but sometimes they didn't come out the right size, so I go ahead and glue the metal ones on there, and I know that they're all the right size, consistent. So then I glue the sprues on for the different parts. This is also kind of a tedious process because the parts are really small, considering that there's arms or, different, head options or, whatever it may be. So I've got a little collection of sprue scraps. Basically, it's just a plastic styrene rod that I'll add to different areas, and you can see that this is going to be where the vents and the gates are, where the resin is actually going to go into the mold. So I try to keep in mind areas that kind of stick off to the side, or an arm, or other features that may stick off the model. So I want to provide gates and so forth for those to allow the air to escape as the resin fills in the mold. So once I glue all of those on there using either super glue or a hot glue gun, then I'll take and attach those to these wooden sections that I have that's actually going to form the reservoir in the top of the mold whenever you fill it with resin. And as I glue those on there, I want to make sure that the figure is balanced, so that keeps it doesn't really keep it from falling over, because when I glue it to the base of the mold box, it's not going to tip over. But because of the volume of the figure, it has to take up a certain space within the center of the mold. So by balancing the figure and gluing it, onto these little sprues, it creates a uniform void, inside the mold. So once all of these are sprued up, then it's a matter of going on and building the mold boxes around them. Now, what I use for mold boxes, I started out using Legos, but that was tedious, having to clean all of the extra silicone and so forth off of those, and digging out of the bottom of them whenever I got ready to make another set of molds. So I've moved on to using this cardstock, and basically these are magazine-sized backing boards. So it's like an acid-free cardboard. And so basically I just cut out, strips of that on the paper cutter to whatever height, I need the mold box to be. And then I'll score along the corners of that and fold it up into a box shape. Now, the cool thing about these magazine backing boards, the ones that I get, they're slick on one side and matte on the other. So I'll use the slick side, or the smooth side, for the inside of the box. And that also creates a really clear surface once the silicone comes out, so you can see through it. It's not cloudy or anything. So I want to make sure that whenever I fold those boxes up, that the smooth part is on the inside of the box. Then I'll just trim off the extra and use that scrap for the bottom of where the mold box is going to attach. So once the box is all folded up, I'll glue the reservoir strip onto the bottom of the mold box form, and then center the box itself around the figure. And you want to make sure, I usually mark an X on that bottom piece in order to make sure that I've got the sprue centered, where I want it to go, to allow enough room, around the figure, because that way the more material of silicone that you have around the figure, the more that the mold is going to hold its shape whenever you cut it out later, and it fits back together. So that way it creates more of a seamless fit after the mold's been split open. So then once that's centered, I hot glue along the outside of the bottom of the mold box to make sure that there's no leaks. I have had a couple of mold boxes with a leak, and it got out all over the tray, and that was a mess to clean up. But anyway, so we go through and repeat that process for all of the figures that need to be molded. Now, of course, since I've got one print of each thing, each one of these masters is one mold of the character. So what that will allow me to do is, whenever I cast these, I'll cast them in a blue resin so that I'll know that those are first run castings. And then those masters will be ganged together onto their own sprue in order to create production molds. But we'll show you that next time. And once all the mold boxes are made, I get to use this really cool, handy spreadsheet that my buddy Charles made for me, which tells us, how much of the Platsil silicon in order to pour into the mold. So I take the dimensions of the mold box and calculate them up, and then that tells me how many milliliters of silicon that I'll need for that mold box. So then I measure out, how much that's going to be, multiplied by how many molds I've got in the tray, and then mix up the appropriate amount of silicon. So I like this 7320 from Polytech because it's a little bit less expensive than the translucent silicon that Smooth-On puts out. So once I get all that mixed up and poured into the tray, you can see that there's no excess left in there. So I had exactly the amount of silicon that I needed in order to fill up all of the mold boxes. Then what those will do is those will go into the pressure tank, and all of the bubbles that are created in the silicon through the mixing process, it'll squeeze all of those out. So I'll clamp the tank down, or clamp the lid down on the tank rather, and then once everything's tightened, then I'll fill the tank up to about 50 pounds of pressure. And I found that that's an optimal pressure to use to get basically all of the bubbles out of the silicon. And so it comes out, pretty clear looking after that. Then after about an hour or so, the silicon itself is set up and cured, so I can just peel that out of the container and clean that up and clean up the spatula, later on. So it just peels right off of that. After depressurizing the tank, then I'll open up that lid and pull the mold trays out, or the mold tray. So you can see here that everything after about an hour or so has solidified. This has actually been overnight because I had some other stuff to do. But anyway, so now I can just go through, each one of the mold boxes and peel off the outside cardboard. So there's not really any mold release or anything that's required on that. It basically just, peels off of the silicone. So then you can see here that, the print and the sprues and everything are clearly visible inside the mold, which is going to be, really handy to be able to see that when I start, cutting these things open in order to get the originals out. Then there's a little place on the bottom of where or it's actually on the top as the mold's filled up, that kind of creates this little lip around the top of the mold, which is actually the bottom now. So here you can see all the molds lined up, and we will go on next time and cut those open. So hopefully that gives you a little bit of an insight into part of the mold making process. What we'll show you on the next part is, cutting those molds open and, removing the pieces and everything, and then going through the master casting process. So you'll get to see those masters, and then depending on, how long that takes, we'll, sprue those up and show you what the production molds look like and go through some production castings. Then I may even go forward and show you what's involved in, putting all of that stuff in the web store and that part of the back end of it. Because there's also a lot of stuff that goes on behind the scenes that you guys may be interested in seeing. That's, part of, what we have to do here at the Bombshell Miniatures factory shop. So anyway, I'm going to let you get back to your Saturday morning, and hopefully that's been, interesting to you, and you'll be able to spread that around. Be sure and like and subscribe to the YouTube channel, and go check out Patreon. This month over on the Patreon, we've got cyberpunk theme. So I've got some cool sci-fi minis over there that's suitable for lots of cyberpunk games and that sort of thing. So those will be posted the first week of March for you to download those STL files. And then later on, those will be going into the web store, just like in the process that we're showing here. So anyway, I'll let you get back to your Saturday, and we will see you on the next episode.